Alright, well let's get started here and doing a little bit of demo. This is my first try at making a Camtasia video, so we'll see how it goes. It should be recording my screen over here, so I hope that'll work. And I've already got Arc Catalog and Arc Map running, so I'll just be switching back and forth between the two and doing a little bit of demo of how to set up the file structure for practical in this class. So I'll bring up Arc Catalog first, and I already have some folder connections made to folders that I have created on the desktop. The MGIS data, which is all the data for the price Mastering ArcGIS workbook. I have a folder for all of my data for Bonner County that I'm going to be using partly in this demo here. And I've got a new folder that I just created called Practicals, which is empty. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new folder in here. I'm going to call it PMO Practical 1. I'll expand it. Expand that one. There's nothing in there. So I'm going to follow the data management protocol for file structure and folder structure that you should have already downloaded and have in your possession. It's in the document known as the next user. So I'm just going to create the folders that need to be here in this practical folder, the subfolders that contain different kinds of data sets that I might use in a project. And this simulates working in an agency or a corporation or whatever kind of situation you want to think of, where you probably will have a data structure that you will have to follow. And there's a reason why we do this in geospatial work and then just in work in general. It's to standardize a work environment and a project environment so that the literally the next user who comes along who is going to use your data sets will know what data to look for. They'll know what folders to look in to find things and things like that. So images, rasters, forgot rasters. Okay, I'm going to create the rasters folder. Okay, and so now I've got basically all the subfolders that I'm going to need to work on things in this project. Databases contain geodatabases, Excel spreadsheets, things like that. Images are graphics that are produced as outputs. Rasters are grids, things like digital elevation model, satellite imagery, digital aerial photography, things like that should go in there. The reports folder has Microsoft Word documents, PDFs, text files. In general, just the written things that you might need to store related to a project. It also is where you put the Arc Map and Arc Scene project files, which are MXDs and SXDs, more on those later. Vectors contain vector information. And then there's the zero folder, which for some reason gives students a lot of trouble, so I'll kind of explain what's going on with that. The zero folder is where you put things that you're importing into the project raw. So if I was to download from the web data sets that I was going to extract pieces from, I'd put them in the zero folder first. What we're going to do here, or what I'm going to demonstrate here, is going to be how to create a geodatabase and then import things from existing data sets in another location. So if I go into the databases folder, I click on it here, there's nothing in it. So I'm going to create a new file geodatabase. We always want to use file geodatabases whenever possible. They are far more robust. They have very good data handling properties, and they are more prone to survive errors than a personal geodatabase. So my recommendation is never use a personal geodatabase. I'm going to call this one Practical 1, and I may decide if I was working on a project to make multiple geodatabases if I really wanted to separate out the different data types. For example, if I wanted to have a geodatabase where I only put the vector data, I'd create a separate one for that, create a separate one for raster data that I'm bringing into it, those kind of things. It's possible to store both types of data in the same geodatabase. I kind of like to separate them myself just as an organizational thing. So now I've got an empty geodatabase, and I want to bring some things into my database that I'm going to be working on for the project. So I can open up the Bonner County folder, which has a number of subfolders in it, lots of different data sets that are in here. For the sake of just creating different data sets and copying them around. So here's an example. I've got a geodatabase that I created for this class. It's a Landsat series of images that I mosaicked together, and then I clipped out the Bonner County area. And so what I'll do here first, let's see what we can do to explore what this data actually is. If we open it up, we see it's got 4 bands in it. This is a multi-band raster. It contains 4 different grids together at the same time, and they actually, band 1, 2, 3, and 4 are actually showing us blue, green, red, and infrared radiation. That's what's in this thing. And I want to bring this into my existing project. So I can open up my databases folder. This is where geodatabases go. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it. And I now have a copy of that data in here. So if I was working in my 0 folder, if I had unzipped things into the 0 folder, as ground zero is kind of what that stands for in my terminology. That's why I'd make it Z, so it's alphabetically the last thing that shows up in my project folder. This is something that eventually I'm going to remove from the project before I share it with someone else. So if I was bringing this in raw, this Landsat data in raw from the web or from a zip archive that I downloaded off the web, I would unzip it into this 0 folder, and then I would copy it into my database or wherever it was supposed to go. If it was just straight vector data, I'd download it, unzip it in the 0 folder, and then I'd copy the files into the vector subfolder. And then when I'm sharing this data with someone else, as you will be doing with me in the practicals for this class, what we'll do is shut down our catalog, you shut down ArcMap, you shut down everything that's using the data in the 0 folder. You temporarily move it someplace else and then create a zip archive out of the remaining practical folder, whatever's in there. And that gets zipped up in a standard zip archive and uploaded into BBLearn. Okay, so let's see here. Now we've got the Landsat data. Let's copy in something else. Let's just for the sake of doing that. So we've got a DEM here, a digital elevation model. So I'm going to copy that from this folder here, and I'm going to put it into the raster folder. And there it is. Okay. Let's see, what else do I need to bring in? I'll bring in some things from... Okay, here we go. Here's some shapefiles. So let's grab these shapefiles. I might be able to just grab one at a time. So that'll work. Copy those. And in my catalog tree, I want to put these into my new project vector folder. So I'm going to paste it in there. There it is. And I'll paste a couple of the other ones. Actually, I'll just grab this whole subfolder. And the reason why I'm doing this here is that it's safer when you're first learning how to do things in ArcGIS, when you're moving files around, to do them inside Arc Catalog. Arc Catalog is going to make sure that all of the files that you need to make this shapefile work are going to be present in the new folder when you copy and move them around. If I did it in Windows using Windows Explorer, sometimes Windows Explorer does not copy all the things that we need in order to make the geospatial data function properly. So the safest way to do it, even though it may take a little while right now, is to use our catalog as an interface to copy things around. So I've just put in these admin set shapefiles. There are some other ones here, Hydro, Linear, and some other ones that you may have already downloaded and have available on your computer. I'm only going to copy a few of them into this just so we can demonstrate what's happening in this folder structure. So the next thing I need to do, the next thing I should demo is then I can move things around between an existing geodatabase here and my new empty geodatabase that has nothing in it. So I'm going to import, or I'll first demonstrate this one. I'm going to copy the BC commonplaces. And I'll put that here in my geodatabase. It's a feature class. Tells me what its name is, and the different options that I have available. I'm just going to take the default options, copy that across, and now that's in there. There's another way to move things around between geodatabases, and that is that I can import from another geodatabase, import multiple things. So if I want to move a lot of things around between geodatabases, this is pretty handy, a good way to do that. Notice that there's also an export. So if I was up here in publication data, I can say export to a geodatabase, multiple things, or I can export these individual feature classes out as shapefiles or DBase database files or whatever we have access to in here. Normally, you're going to be moving things around from a geodatabase to another geodatabase. So I'll export and pull up that option. And here it's showing me these are all the ones that I have access to. So I'm going to say we're going to use blocks. I'm going to do, if I select all of those, except for commonplaces, we already moved that one, and then I'll take out, let's see, oh, looks like I've already done some work in this one, so I've got some files in here wasn't really expecting to see. So I think there might be a couple of extra copies in here. Let's see what happens when we do that. So we're going to put it in the output geodatabase. We're going to select where that database is located on our hard drive. So it's located here in Practicals. And we're going to put it into the PMO Practical 1. We'll add that as the destination. It looks like my selections may have disappeared. Let's see what happens when I click OK. And it is moving things between, and you wind up with a progress bar. Sometimes when ArcGIS does an operation, you will get an individual progress bar like this. Occasionally, the little Earth icon down at the bottom near there and up around this area here above it, it may show you a progress bar in ArcMap or ArcScene, ArcGlobe. Sometimes you don't get to see any of that in ArcCatalog. ArcCatalog is a place where we manage data and move data around, and it doesn't always show us a true progress bar that you might be expecting to see. But here in this tool, it's telling us, okay, now it's completed everything. It took 54 seconds. for that process to complete. So I'll close it, look over here, and let's expand the geodatabase, and there it is. All the things that we had selected have been moved into this, they've been copied into this geodatabase, so we have now our original data in that copy. So that's pretty good. Okay, and so here now we've assembled, we don't have data in every subfolder. That may not happen in any given project that you're working on, but the data management protocol that I'm specifying for the class indicates that you will create each of these subfolders in your project folder whether or not you use it. And that's, again, to kind of give you some experience in standardizing the amount or what we're doing. We're standardizing the data management aspect of the class. Okay, so before I leave Arc Catalog and jump into ArcMap and just do a real brief operation in there, Arc Catalog allows you to rename data. You can click on it. If I click on it again, it allows me to rename it, as long as it's not open anywhere else. So if it isn't open in ArcMap, I can rename things here, and I can do a lot of data management operations. And one of the things that we can do in Arc Catalog, if you decide to use it as your principal data management thing, you can also do some data management in ArcMap. But there are some things that we can do here that are not going to be as easy to do in ArcMap. And one of those is going to be building a preview. So let's build a preview. Let's look at the Landsat image and see what it actually is. The contents, there's 4 bands in it. Let's first look at the description. So this is metadata about the Landsat data set. It tells us the bounding coordinates for the 2 main opposite corners. We can read down through here and it'll give us some other information about it. Where it's located right now is on Orca, my computer here in my office. And it gives us some other information about this coordinate system. It's WGS 84 UTM Zone 11 North, GCS Geographic Coordinate System, WGS 1984, and all that stuff, which we'll learn about later on in the class. If you're viewing this later in the class as a refresher, you've already seen it. Things about coordinate systems, when it was created, and some other things. And this is where on some data sets you're going to find there's a lot of information that's entered in here, pages and pages of information. For this one, there's not a whole lot. But the other thing that we can do here in our catalog, we can generate a preview. And so here's a preview of what this data looks like. There are some analytical things that we could do in our catalog. We can use our toolbox here, and there are some things that we can do. But it may be better to try to do your analytical operations in ArcMap, since that's where most of them are going to take place. Know that you do have access to our toolbox here. You can open it up, and you will have the ability to apply tools to the data and create new data sets, modified data sets, as you would in ArcMap. It's just not going to display automatically in the table of contents with a new version of what that data looks like. That's what ArcMap is. It's the visualization aspect and the primary analytical aspect of the ArcGIS suite of programs. So let's take another look. Let's take a look at the DEM. What does the DEM look like here? So it's obviously a different projection system. We can tell visually it just altered. So if I looked in the description, I should discover that there is, it's GCS NAD 83 based on the Albers projection. So this is definitely a different projection. If we were going to work with this stuff, these 2 data sets and maybe the other data sets that I've already looked at here and imported, we're probably going to need to do some reprojection work to make them match. That's the best practice in ArcGIS, and that's something that's covered in the lectures. Let's take a look, for the sake of argument, now at this vector data set, and it is showing us counties around Bonner County, including Bonner County. And here is the Bonner County Comprehensive Land Use Planning data set. The see the voting. Here's the Bonner County polling places, Bonner County voting precincts. And so we can see here in our catalog just a really quick, down and dirty preview of what is actually in the spatial part of the geospatial data set. We can't really do a whole lot of cartography with it, though. We can't do visualizing. There's not anything that we can do in our catalog. It's not designed for that. I think that's probably enough here. So let's close this out. Or not close our catalog. I'm going to leave it open, but I'm going to minimize it and then bring up ArcMap. So ArcMap now is our interface, main interface for visualizing, creating maps, showing the data, and also running analytical techniques. So most of these will be available in our catalog as well. The Arc Toolbox is available in different forms in the different parts of ArcGIS: ArcMap, ArcCatalog, ArcScene, and ArcGlobe. But most of the things that you do analytically are going to probably occur here in ArcMap. So I've docked it on this side. If I need to, I can grab it anytime. Let's see if I can close it. Will it close? I'll just leave it alone. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do, first thing I am going to do once I start a new project, is I'm going to save a copy of the project. I'm going to save it, save as, and I want to put it in the right folder. And so the correct folder here on my hard drive on the C drive is actually in my practicals folder here in the root directory in C. So here's a place where you need to be aware you're working in the Windows file management system. So I'm going to save this file from ArcMap inside the project folder and then the reports subfolder. So I'm going to create this. I'm going to call it PMO Practical 1. I'm using the same naming convention for everything, so everything matches, so I know beyond any reasonable doubt that this map document, this specific ArcMap document, works with all the data that's in the Practical 1 project folder. So I'm going to save it here. And my mouse has suddenly stopped. There we go. Stop responding. See if I can open it up. And now it's updated up here in the top of my window. I've got it. Great. I'm working with the proper thing. One more thing I'm going to do. This is a critical thing that you really need to do when you're working with map documents or scene documents or globe documents, depending on which version or which subcategory of ArcGIS you're working with. I need to go into map document properties. In here I can type in a variety of things, and depending on some tools I may need that information. I'm not going to put anything in right now, but I am going to go down here to this box, path names, and I'm going to store relative path names to data sources. Okay, this is a critical data management step. What this means is, given the data management protocol that I'm requiring you to use, you're putting everything into your folder. In my case, that's located I've got a practicals folder going on my C drive, a subfolder for this specific project called PMO Practical 1 for Practical 1. Okay, it's being stored in the reports subfolder, and this is the name of the actual file that I'm saving. So when I save relative path names, what that does is it says, okay, ArcMap, you know that the MXD file is located here in the reports folder. And as long as all of my data is stored relative to this location within the project folder, or within the project subfolder, and all of its subfolders, so the geodatabases folder, the databases folder, the raster folder, the vector folder that's in here, as long as all my data is in there and remains there, when I save this project and I save all the data that are in it, and I close out ArcMap and ArcCatalog, what this allows me to do is copy this whole folder structure and everything that's in it and give it to someone else, and it will open properly on their computer. So I store relative path names. I'm going to click apply, click OK, and now whenever I save the project again, I can send it to someone else and it's going to open properly for them. The next thing that we want to do here real quick, just to demonstrate how this ArcMap is working, let's add some data from the project file we just created. And so we're already working in it from ArcCatalog, so it knows to look in there. But I'll jump up and see, here's all the folder connections that I have to these specific folders on my C drive. These are different external drives that occasionally are attached to my computer. E is actually a secondary hard drive on my computer. F, G, H, and I are removables that occasionally get used. So anyway, I'm going to go back in here. I'm working in my Practical 1 project data sets. So I can add in, let's see here, well, let's add in a bunch of things. I'm going to add in first something from Bonner County. Let's add in common places. Let's add in the voting precincts, and then maybe the road system. So I held down the control key when I pressed each of those names, and it pulled in those 3 data sets. I'm going to go add some more stuff. I'll add in the Landsat data. Here I just click on it once. I'll add in that whole data set. If I double clicked on this, I could add in an individual band, but I want the whole thing. So I'm going to click on that, add that in. It gives me a warning because it's in a different coordinate system and maybe using a different datum. ArcGIS can show this properly oriented to my data sets that I've already brought in. I know that there's a problem with it. I'm not going to do any analytical work today, so I'm not going to worry about that. We're just going to bring it in. It's there. Let's see here. I'm going to quickly change the color on that data set so that now we see the Landsat data, the common places, the road system, the voting precincts superimposed over the raster data. And then let's add in, let's see, from the vector data set. These are individual shapefiles. They work the same as a feature class in a geodatabase. Let's add in the counties. That's one we don't have. So here's the counties set. I will also make that no color. There we go. So we've got all those things. So now we've added data in, and I'm making good use of my wide screen by maximizing the view to show all these things. I can zoom in and zoom out, if I want to focus in on particular things. And then I can pan, by using the hand, I can pan around and see where these things are discovered anywhere in the map. Oh, let's see here. We've got a color problem, so let's change the color of our common places to something that'll contrast well against the greens and things like that. Let's pick an ugly color. Let's pick pink. That should show up nicely against the green background. So I'm just doing that for color contrast reasons, not because the pink is the best thing to show in general. And I can change the symbol to something else if I want to, but it does a really nice job contrasting against the background so we can see those. Okay. What else should I demonstrate here at this point in time? So we've done all that. Oh, I've added things in. What I haven't done is I haven't saved the data, so I'm going to save it now. And when I save it, I click on this little disk icon, and it saves whatever I've got shown right now. All the cartographic choices that I've made are saved. It's a work in progress sort of a thing. If I do this, maximize the extent, and save it again, when I open it up again, it's going to open up just as I see it right now. Or if I give the data, the entire project to someone else, it'll open up exactly like we're seeing it there. So that's a pretty handy feature. else should I mention at this point in time? That's probably good enough to give you an introduction to how our catalog works, how to set up a project folder structure. Let's see here. I'm forgetting something. What's really important? Okay, what's really important? So there is another thing that's really critical. I'm not working off a script, obviously. I'm doing this on the fly, just like I would if I was in a live class, demonstrating it to folks. So there's something I forgot to mention, and that is here. Notice that when I create folder names, and I haven't done anything with files yet, but when I create file names, we do not ever, ever, ever use a space in a file name or a folder name for any folder, any file that we use in ArcGIS. You just never do that. We never use special characters like the ampersand, the plus sign, the minus sign, greater than, less than, percentages, dollar sign, anything like that. No funky, weird symbols are being used anywhere in a file or folder name. If you do that, you will create problems. You will create problems that generate errors that cause ArcGIS to function improperly and give you an error message. You will also introduce problems that you don't see in your calculations. So just never do that. The best practice for managing data related to file and folder names, just use letters and numbers. Every file name should start with a letter, and never use spaces, never use special characters anywhere, no matter what. And what I'm doing here, I didn't really explain much about that, but I'm doing this work as high in the root directory as I can. So I've created this practical folder to contain all of my different projects. I may run some videos on those later for the other ones in the class. I may not, I'm not sure. But I'm going to be storing all the data in these individual folders here as high as I can in the C directory. I'm not working on my desktop, for example. I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to open these data sets up on my desktop like here. I'm not going to work on this. This is deep in a file structure in Windows. And so when I open up this particular subfolder here, it's nested very deep in the file and folder hierarchy, and that becomes a problem that most people don't realize, except that we mention it here and it's mentioned in your workbook. Notice that there's a number of characters in this file name. There's a limit to how many ArcGIS can actually read, and you don't want to hit that limit. So we never use special characters. We never use spaces. We try to limit the number of characters used in a name. We try to limit the number of characters used in a project hierarchy path name, like what you see here. So I think that's probably all that I can think of at this point in time to show you the basic operations of things, and especially setting up that folder structure, working in our catalog, in ArcMap. Notice I have them both up right now. Sometimes when you have both ArcMap and catalog open, one of the programs or the other may institute a lock on the files. So there's certain operations that you won't be able to do. I can also access the catalog over here, and a lot of students in the live class, they just love using this as a way to drop and drag things into a project. So here I'll just demonstrate how to do that, I suppose. We'll go into, grab another one out of here. So something out of here that we don't have added into the project already, the comprehensive land use. So I'm just going to grab this, pull it over, and say, hi, here we go, zap, and it brings it over and drops it right in. Okay, but notice that this is where students get into a lot of problems using these practicals in a live class, is that they'll just zap things in left and right from wherever they are. Doesn't matter what folder they're in, and they won't pay attention to this. because they're going to be turning the data into me. And so sometimes here on campus, they'll be working on their U drive, which I don't have here. I'm not a student. I don't have a U drive. So they'll have their data stored in the U drive, and they'll just zap everything over in here. Into cool, that's wonderful. I'll save my MXD here in the reports folder where it's supposed to go, and I'll turn it all in. And the problem is that, well, gee, all your data was stored in the U drive that I can't access because I'm not you. So, um, so I'd recommend, here's why I'm using this data management protocol is because you will be loading all of your data into the project folder, into the appropriate subfolder, and it will then be located here. You'll save it and use it in your MXD file. And then when you save the whole thing and turn it into me, it's all there and it'll work when I open it on my computer. So I saved it again. We just saved that thing. I'm going to leave it the way it is and call that a good one. So hopefully this all recorded and I just didn't waste 36 minutes of my time. Hopefully this shows you some things that are useful that you will be using in this class. And so I'll sign off.